All right, good evening. My name is Crystal Morton. I'm the president of the Benjamin Banneker Association. And Benjamin Banneker Association is a national nonprofit organization dedicated to educational advocacy, providing professional development for teachers. We want to support the learning of all students, but specifically the learning of African American students. So I thank you all for joining us tonight. I'll put our website in the chat box if you want to learn more information about us. But I'm going to yield the floor to our presenters this evening from Casio America, which has been a long-time supporter and sponsor of the Benjamin Banneker Association. So Amy and Karen, I'll yield the floor to you.
Oh, thank you, Crystal. Hi, everyone. We're very excited to be here this evening. We really thank Crystal and BBA for inviting us to do this. I'm Karen Greenhouse, and I'm going to throw up the biography here. Y'all can read that at your leisure. But I've been an educator for over 30 years and in math and in technology. So tonight, I'm really excited tonight because this is a new dynamic math software that's out there, and it can do really great things. And that's sort of the goal of tonight, is to kind of give you a big, broad overview of what it can do. And then we'll be offering future webinars, one a week, on specific math content and really diving into specifics of the tool. So tonight's just an overview. And I'm going to be presenting, and then I have Amy Chow, who I'm going to let introduce herself. She's going to be moderating and answering questions and stopping me when I go too fast.
Yes. Hi, I'm Amy Chow. I've been a math educator for just about 14 years now. Previously, I was a high school math teacher in Texas. I've been with Casio for quite a few years now, working in their training department and curriculum, and just working closely with our educators. And so before we get started, everyone can stay on mute. If you have any questions, feel free to throw it in the chat panel, which I think most of you guys are hearing. I apologize for my sound. My headset is not working properly. I have a new one coming. And also, you don't need to have your video camera on. Feel free to turn that off. I'm actually going to cut myself out shortly so that we can focus on Karen and the presentation. So back to you, Karen.
Are we ready? Okay, so I'm going to switch my screen to the website. So we're going to start here. So let me know, Amy, or everyone, if you can see it. So right now, everyone should be seeing the landing page of Classpad.net. Is it up, Amy?
Yes.
Okay. So Classpad.net, as I was saying, it's a free to students, teachers, and it's what we call an all-in-one web-based math software, which I'm going to give you a demonstration of what that means first before we actually dive into some of the basics. But this is the landing page, and today is an overview, and it's going to seem like I'm going through things very fast, so I don't want you to panic. I wanted to point out before I got into things that on the landing page, there's a lot of resources that you can use to help you. So right up here at the top, you can look at the features specifically. I'm going to go through all the features tonight, but you can explore them more there. We have trainings, we have videos. There's a whole YouTube site where we put how-tos and mini math lessons. I've been doing a lot of those. So there's a lot of support on the YouTube. There's free activities, which we're going to go into in just a minute. And then there's help built right into the landing page. So there's a user guide that goes through each little, how do I make a line? How do I measure an angle if I want to do the geometry? So all of this lives right on the landing page. So I am going to seem like I'm going fast tonight, so just know there's a lot of resources out there. And then in our future webinars, we're going to be going more into specifics. But on the landing page, you can, I'm just scrolling down here, you can just start playing with this tool right away. You don't need to have an account. So if you're working with students, they can just start playing and doing all the math they want right there without having an account. You can create an account very easily, and I suggest that you guys do that when you're done and want to start playing, because when you create an account, you're then able to save anything that you find or anything that you create. So I want to talk real quick about activities. We have a ton of free, ready-to-use activities that you can just start using the tool right away. So I'm going to click this, and so that's from the landing page here, and you'll notice they're kind of organized by our functions. So we have calculate, graph, geometry, data. And I'm going to explain that a little bit more, but I want to just show you what it means to have an activity. So I'm going to go into the Algebra 2 activities, and you'll see there's lots of ready-to-use activities. These are ready to go on lots of different content. So I'm just going to pick one and show you what it looks like. And this is a really nice way to show you what I mean by all-in-one. So all-in-one means you can do everything. You can do statistics, you can do geometry, you can do calculations, you can do sequences, all in one place without having to go to another tool. So this is an example of a ready-to-use activity, and I want to just show you that it has everything you need. So here's text on the one page. There's a place for directions. You can write answers. Students can work on it and put their answers here. This is a graph, and it has an image on it, so you can do curve fitting. Over here is a statistical table. And you'll notice when we're in statistics, there's all these things you can do in statistics. And if I scroll down, I can do equations, and there's so much more. So this is just a really nice, quick visual of what I mean by all-in-one. I don't have to leave to go to a different tab to do a different object. I have all this unlimited space. I can move things around if I don't like the way they're situated. So that's what we mean by all-in-one. This is a ready-to-use activity. I don't have an account signed in right now. I can just play. But let's say I want to save it. I love it. I found this fantastic activity. I need to have an account so that it knows where to save. So I'm going to log into my account to show you the difference. So if you look up here, I can't do much with this except what's in here, but I'm going to go to the three dots, and I'll just warn you, tell you ahead of time. Three dots is really important in Classpad.net. It basically means there's more. So anytime you see three dots, and I want to just point out, see how there's three dots here, and if I clicked on this graph, there's three dots, it means there's more. So there's ways you change the settings. So I'm going to go to the three dots at the top of the whole paper and log in. I have an account. I'm going to log in with it. I'm actually going to log in with a different account, but there we go. And notice I could have a link to my Apple account, my Google account, my Microsoft account, and if I'm not registered, I'm working in a paper I love, here's a way to create an account also. So you can do it from the home page, or you can do it after you've found an activity. You can create an account right there. I'm going to log in, and I want to show you the difference, how you know you're in your account. Because it's going to look very similar. It's going to kind of reset itself. And it is a little slow because we have a lot of people on. I hope it's going to do it. Well, let's go back the hard way here. Let's try it again. All right, it was just being fickle. So now I'm in my account, and I want you to see the difference. See this little cloud up here? This is telling you you're in an account because now we're saving. And Classpad.net saves automatically. So you don't have to think about, oh gosh, did I do something that forgot to save? It's constantly saving to the cloud. So your papers are always, whatever you're working on is being saved. And this activity that I loved, if I want to now save it because I'm in my account, up here at the top, I can just duplicate it. Let's see if this works. And it gets a copy of it is now in my account. And here we go. And I know, again, the difference is I know I'm in my account, and this copy is now my copy in my account because of this little cloud. And if up here, now that I'm in an account, I actually have this little stack of papers, which means all my papers are being saved. So I'm just going to click that to show you where your papers go. So this is my account. It's got all my papers here. Here's all the activities I've created. I have quite a few, a little overwhelming. Notice you can create folders. You can create folders within folders. I'm just going to do this real quick just to show you. So I have an algebra folder. It has a chapter 1 folder, and in the chapter I have sections. So you can really manage and organize your papers very easily in this paper management. And here's that paper that I just saved, that I copied from the activities. We did do a webinar already on how to manage your papers and share them and save them and share the URLs that are created. So I'm not going to go into that right now, but this is where all the papers live. And that webinar is going to be on demand on our website that you can look at it. What I really want to do is get back into what can Classpad do? What's the functionality? What's the overview? Before I start that, are there any questions, Amy, that I maybe need to address before I get into the functionality? Amy?
I forgot to unmute myself.
Okay.
Sorry. No, I was able to get everything answered. We were good to go on.
Okay. All right. So I'm in a paper. So a new paper in Classpad looks just like this, like a blank screen. So what can you do? And the thing is, you can do anything. So that's the really beautiful thing about this software is you can do anything. You're not constricted to only doing graphs or only doing geometry. You can do whatever it is you want. So at the top of the paper, I just want to talk, this is called the banner. And again, remember 3 dots means you can change everything. And so here's where you can change the math settings for the whole paper. You can change the complex form. You can change the way your calculations come out, how many decimal points. So this is kind of the overall paper settings. And again, we have a webinar that goes through all of that. I'm going to change the color. You can change the color of your banners, pretty easy. Up here, the question mark, here's where the user guide lives within the paper. So whenever you're like, oh, I wish I remembered how to measure something, you can just go right to the user guide and it has a nice little picture list tutorial right there. I'm going to change the title of my paper. So this is going to be my sample paper for the day. And I'm going to get right into what can you do with Classpad? Well, you can do anything. So anywhere I click, notice what happens. I get this list of functionalities, and this is the things we can do. And so I'm going to go through each one of these and demonstrate very briefly what each one does. So we've got a calculate function, we've got graphing, we've got geometry, we've got data, we've got sequence, finance, and then text. So I'm going to go through each one, give you a little bit of an example of each. Now, I'm going to click over here and start a calculate sticky. So we call everything a sticky, and the reason is because you can make it stick wherever you want. So you have complete control of how your paper looks. So this calculation sticky, I can move it wherever it makes sense. So I'm just going to leave it there for right now. And it is exactly what you would expect. It's a calculator. And notice the minute it pops up, I get this soft keyboard here, right? So Classpad does work with touch screens, so I could use the keypads down here. I could use my computer. I'm going to tend to use my computer just because it's faster, but I could be clicking these buttons, and you'll notice there's lots of different math templates, right? So we have all of our, trig functions, we have matrices, all of these different functions that we can use, and there's a couple that'll pop up once we click that sticky. So I'm going to go back up here. I'm going to use a template. We have a nice fraction, so I'm just going to do a simple calculation just to show you how calculate works. Oh, that's a boring fraction. Plus, and now I'm going to use my computer. So instead of using the template, which I could use, I'm just going to use my computer because it's a little faster. And then I'm going to hit enter, execute, and here's my answer. Classpad lets you toggle between standard form and decimal form, so that's really nice. Another thing that it does, you can make, lists really easy. So I'm going to call this my test list. Oops. And how do I know what to put in my list? Like, how do I know the syntax? That's all up here again in that question mark in the function list. But I'm just going to type in some pretend test numbers here to show you some of the functionality that it does. So this right here is what I call a define. So down here, you'll notice in the template, I can set an equal or I can define. So I have defined this test or this list to be this set of numbers. And now Classpad knows anytime I use that this is the list of those numbers, anytime I use the word test. So now I can use some of the functionality. Let's say I want to find the mean of those tests. So notice the minute I start typing something, I get this template down here that I could just click, and now I know what to put in here. So I'm going to put in the name of my test that I've already defined. And let's get rid of, sorry, I hit the wrong delete thing. Let's try that again. And so now it remembers that this was my test, and there's the mean, and there is the mean of that test. So Classpad is kind of interconnected. All the things talk to each other. And you can define functions as well. So there's lots of things you can do in the calculating. I'm going to define a function to be something like 2x squared plus 3x plus 1. So all I've done is define this function, but now Classpad knows that anytime I use g of x, that's the function that it's pulling from. And so I can do things like now just evaluate the function for given numbers, or if you're just working with students, Classpad allows you to do multi-character variables. So I could do what is g of dog. And this is a great way to really help students understand what does that mean to evaluate a function, and notice it's replacing the x value with my multi-character dog. So lots of really neat things that it can do and calculate. But now I want to show you how everything is connected. So I defined g of x, and now let's open up the next sticky, a graph sticky. So here's a graph sticky. And before I get into actually graphing anything, here's those 3 dots. I just want to point out that that's always going to mean that there's more. So notice you can turn the axes on and off. You can turn the numbers on and off. You can turn the grid on and off. You can change the labels of of the axes. So instead of x and y, you could have time and distance, for example. Here's where you change the scale, the range, and the domain. You can, if you have inequalities, you can show the union or the intersection. So here's where all the settings live. But let's actually go into graph. So here's a graph, and down here at the bottom are the things you can do with a graph. So you can plot an equation. You can plot data in a table. You can add a picture, so you can do some curve fitting, or you can just plot points. So I'm going to choose f of x, and notice again, everything is a sticky, so I can move it to different locations to make my paper look the way I want it to. So let's put that function that we defined over here. So I'm going to graph g of x, and here's my graph. And if I click on the graph, I get the key points to show up. And if I click on the points, here's one of the things I love. Because Classpad does standard notation, I actually can see the actual values, the real values of that. If I don't want to, I can then change it to decimal if I'd rather see the decimal versions, but I kind of like the standard. And then you can also pull out a table, and it'll show you a table of values for your functions. And you can change these values or add values to it, and it will give you the solutions there. Another thing, if you click on the graph, this little icon right here shows up. And I can do things like the integral, the normal line, the tangent to the line. So let's just do an integral real quick to show you how easy that is. Where'd it go? Oh, there it is. And so the integral is sort of a template, and you just tell it, what do you want to be the lower? Let's make it 0, and the upper to be 1. And so it'll do the integrals. Or I could make them be sliders instead and really kind of explore that. So you can do sliders as well in the graphing function, just simply as if I add another graph here. Let's just do y equals m times x plus b. And it creates sliders right away. Oops, move those over here. And you can see what happens as you move the sliders. So that's the graphing. There's a lot more to it, but that's just sort of a synopsis. And now I'm going to scroll down. So in Classpad, you have unlimited paper space. So you're not limited to just this one screen that's sitting in front of you. You just can keep on going. I should probably turn these off so they don't get in my way. I can keep on going. So I'm going to keep on going, and I'm going to pull up a geometry sticky. So now I'm doing geometry in the same place that I was doing graphing. So you can make a lot of connections. So if any of you've worked with geometry tools before, this has all of the tools you would expect it to have. So down here at the bottom are your construction tools. So you've got your point tool, your straight edge tools, so line, ray, vector, circle. You can do arcs and circles. There's a polygon tool, rigid, all your conics. You can do functions. You can add text in here. You can also add an image again, so you can do some nice images with geometric constructs on top of them. There's even a protractor if you want to measure and teach students how to use a real protractor. I'm going to get rid of that for now. And then off to the side here, and actually I need to put something in to my thing, but the neatest thing for me is we have this draw capability, so you can just start doing geometry without really even knowing how to use the tool. So if I just am in this draw feature and I want my students to work with circles, all they have to do is draw something that's a circle, or they can make a triangle, or just an angle, or a line. So right away they can start exploring, and once they have it, now all we have to do is move it. So this is dynamic. You can measure. I'm just going to do a couple measures to show you how easy it is. So once you have things in your screen, as with any other geometry tool, then you can do things to them. So you have to have something in your screen, but I can measure, and here's all the things we can measure. And depending, let's click that off. Depending on what I select determines what I can measure. So here's all the different things that you can measure. Exterior angles, interior angles, 360, supplementary. You can construct all of these different things, translations, transformations, all those different things. You can change, the colors of the objects in your screen and all the size. So pretty much anything you'd expect to do in a most geometry. But I did want to point out something that is kind of new and exciting, at least for me. Let's say you have students draw this triangle or whatever shape. If you select it, and we now have this adjustment feature, you can actually make it be a regular in one step. And so now if I were to measure this, because it's regular, it would all have angles that are 60, right? So the adjustment is a feature that I haven't seen anyone else have. So this is kind of an exciting one, because you can, for example, actually, you know what? I'm going to make another sticky. If I made 2 segments, and I now select those 2 and go to adjust, I can make them in one step be parallel. And now I have parallel. And so we can very quickly explore things with students simply by adjusting them. I can then select them and make them now, let's make them be perpendicular to each other. And now what's that mean? What does perpendicular mean? So that's a really cool feature in geometry. And again, remember, 3 dots means there's more. So in geometry, we have lots of grid choices. You can do a dot grid, so that's great for geoboards. You can do isometric grid, which is great for doing 3D looking objects. You can turn on axes so that it would look very much like this. And you can change how you measure the angles and whether you have labeling or not. You can hide objects. So lots of things you can do in geometry. I know I'm going really fast, but I want to make sure I show you everything before we have to end. So the next thing, so we've done calculate, we've done a quick look at graphing, a quick look at geometry. I want to go into data. So data is your, statistics, right? So I want to enter things. It's like a spreadsheet. So I want to enter some numbers. So I'm just going to enter some numbers. And so I am entering them by hand here. And 3, 5. And I'm going to label my columns here. So let's say these are the length and width of a rectangle. So once I have things in here, when I select a column, I get the statistics menu. So just real quick, what's in the statistics menu that you can do? Well, you can find the 1 or 2 variable statistics. So right now it makes sense if I hit 1 variable, not very interesting data, but it shows you all of the 1 variable statistics. So this is nice that you can have it there. So we'll just push that off to the side, or actually I don't really want that anymore. So what else can you do? Well, you can do regressions, lots of different types of regressions. You can do tests, lots of tests, intervals, distributions, inverse distribution. So there's a lot of, any AP stats teachers out there, there's a lot of AP statistical things you can do. And then here are the plots that you can do. So I'm going to take this information. I've selected the columns, so these are my options, and I'm going to make a scatter plot. And it's in a terrible color, so let's switch that to green so you can see it. So here's my scatter plot. And so let's make a box and whisker plot and a histogram, and let's even do a dot plot. We're going to go crazy. So what I want to show you is I have all of these plots on the one graph. And notice it looks very much like the graph from our graphing menu, and it is. They're all very similar. I put all of these on here for a reason. I can look at each of them and say which plot here is the most appropriate for my data, maybe. But what I wanted to really show you is I have 4 different plots. So notice down here I have 4 tabs, and each tab is color-coded to match the plot that it goes with. So the green is my scatter plot, and it's telling me here what's my independent variable, what's my dependent variable, and the box and whisker is the blue plot. That's this one up here, and it's telling me that it's identifying any outliers. So each plot has a little descriptor that goes with it. So the histogram right here, I can actually change the step, how wide these bars are if I wanted to, and where I start. So each plot gets a descriptor, and each plot has a tab. And let's say I would like to look at the box and whisker by itself. So this is a really cool feature of Classpad. If I can plot many graphs on top of each other, but if I decide I want to look at one individually, I can grab the tab and separate it out, and now I have that box and whisker all by itself. And notice when I did that, it pulls out the information that goes with that box and whisker. So now I have a separate graph that's telling me where the data came from. So you can merge graphs, you can separate graphs. So it's really great to explore, representations with students because you have the ability to be really flexible. And then I can go back to my table here, and let's just do a regression for the heck of it. Oh, that's not a good one. Let's do a linear regression. And there's a linear regression. So you can do a lot of plots on top of each other and then pull them out to look at them separate. So statistics has a lot of options in it, so that's a fun one to explore. I'm just scrolling down again because I know it gets really busy in there. So I'm going to go to sequences, and sequences is sort of a template, and you can add more sequences and you can graph them, and then once you have the sequence in here, you can see the table. So I'm just going to put in a sequence. And notice what happened when I put sequence in. The keyboard came up. And in math, this 3 that was kind of hidden the first time we looked at the keyboard is now open because it is related to the sequence. So the template that works for sequences appears once you open the sequence option. So I'm just going to enter I want to use this, a sub n minus 2 times 3. And I want to use that and back. So basically, I'm just using the template now so you can see what I'm doing. So I'm going to do n minus 1. So let's start with, I don't know, 1. And so what happens is it gives me a table. So I entered a sequence, I get a table. The default is to do from 0 to 4, but I can, remember 3 dots mean settings. I can change my range here. So let's say I want to see 0 to 10. And so now it will change the table to show 0 to 10. And then I can also go back here, and there's 3 dots again, and notice I can do recursive or explicit sequences. And I can also graph them so that you can see it. So again, this graph looks very similar to the other graphs, but it is connected to this sequence right here. So that's what the sequence function does. So let's scroll down a little bit more, and we're almost done with just looking at what each one does. So the financial is template based. So there's a lot of financial templates here that you can look at, and each template basically comes with its own set of settings in a sense. So let's say I want to do day count. So I get a template for day count, and if I go to settings, the only thing I can change is the number of days. But so let's just figure out how many days left till Christmas, because that's probably something on everyone's mind right now. So so this is how all the financial templates work. It's got certain things that you fill in, and then you click the calculate, and it does the calculations for it. So there's 253 shopping days left before Christmas. So I think that's pretty good for everybody. And if I wanted a different template, I would just pull up the finance again and choose a different one. So let's say I wanted to do compound interest, and I just want to show you that this now has different settings because it's a different template. So the financial has a lot of different options, and each one is a template that has its own settings. And the last thing I want to just make sure I show you of the functionality. So we've basically seen an example from each one of these. So calculate, graph, geometry, data, sequence, finance, and now text. And text is nice, and remember, it's a sticky like everything, so you can move it around, you can resize it, you can change the color. Whenever I make activities, I tend to pick a color for a certain topic, so statistics might be green, so all of my directions are in green, but then anything I want students to write in, I make yellow. So you can do things like that to kind of make your papers be all kind of uniform. So you can change the size of your font. So I'm just going to say, these might be my directions. And if you want to do italicize or bold, you can use the shortcuts like Control B for bold and Control I for italics. I'm not going to do that right now. But what I really love about the text is you can actually do math type. And so here's where you change the size of the text. But this button right here, the square root of A, allows you to do math type. So the minute you click that, it creates this line where now you'll notice that the whole calculator, the soft keyboard came up with all the templates. So if I wanted my students to be, graphing something like this, I'm making this up, but I can do it very quickly and easy without having to, do shortcuts, especially like when you're doing square root and using the caret, those types of things. So math types are built right into the text, so you can make your math directions be exact, is what's nice about that. So I know this is very fast, but I wanted to make sure that you saw at least all the capabilities of Classpad. And then in future webinars, we're going to go through specifics. So I know like next week, we're going to be using the statistics and the graphing to discuss linear functions, linearity. So there's lots of things that it can do. And before I move to the next last piece, I want to make sure there's no questions that I can answer, or questions I need to answer. Amy.
Karen, can you show the sharing, the different options with sharing? We had a question about like putting it within Google Classroom or MS Teams.
Okay, yes. That's where I was going next. I just want to make sure, were there any other questions specific to like the things they saw? I know it's a lot to take in, and just getting in there and playing is really what I suggest. And remember, you can, go to the question mark. So I will show you what sharing is, but I did want to, before I got into that, just show you, because I'm hoping that you'll create an account and start playing. And if you get stuck on something, we obviously are going to post this recording, and there's YouTube, but you can go really quickly to the user guide, which is, I think, a fantastic feature because it basically lists all the functions I just went over. So notice that there's statistics, there's geometry, there's sequence. So each little function has its own section. And so let's just click geometry. And what you get is a list of all the things you could possibly ask about. So let's say you wanted to know how to measure an angle. If you just click that, it shows you these great pictures, and it tells you, do this, click this, choose that. So it's kind of picture oriented. So that's a really great tool, and it's built right into each paper. It's right here at the question mark. So if you are getting in and playing, make sure you, and you get stuck, and you want to know how to do something, that's a really quick way to find an answer. But about paper sharing. So paper sharing in Classpad is, at this point, URL based. So every paper that's being worked on, whether your students are working on or you're working on it, has a unique URL. And right now I'm in this paper that I just created. And if I want to share it, remember 3 dots, I'm going to go to the 3 dots, and you'll notice my options down here. I can add a description to the paper, like what's this paper about. I can add tags, and tags are really important if you decide you're going to share your paper with the public, because as in a lot of tools, if you create something you think is amazing and you want other people to use it, you can share it publicly. So tags are nice. So, algebra, linear equations, whatever it might be. But notice this button down here says share. So if I click share, here's my options. All papers by default are private. They're your work, your paper, no one else can see them. If you decide to just share URL, it keeps it private except for who you decide to share the URL with. So if I choose that, this is like for a teacher, that might be what I want to do, and it's going to create a unique URL for your paper that you can put on your Google Classroom, your website, in an email, however you want. It's just a URL link, and you could password protect it. Homework means you assigned a due date, but once you hit apply, you'll notice it gets this URL, and this URL, and I'll just show you what that means, is what you're sharing. So this is what you would put on your website or your Google Doc or however. And if I'm the student and you sent me the URL, I'm going to click it or put it in my browser, and up comes the paper that you shared with me. And every student could be working on this paper, but it's their own version of it. So your original is not being impacted because the students are working on basically a copy of your paper, but it is the paper that you sent them. So here's that terrible paper that I just made. I've just shared it, and now students could work on it. Now, notice there's no cloud. This means they're working on it in just the free non-account. If they wanted to save it and send their work back to you, they'd have to have the account and duplicate it so that now they have their own copy that they're going to send you their URL. So that's sort of how we have to do the sharing right now. It's very new. Classpad's still very new, so they're still working on sharing features, but right now URL is the way that we share. If you decide to share publicly, it's the same URL. It just means that anyone who is a Classpad.net user and wants to find other lessons that they think are interesting, they're going to look in the public papers, and that's where that paper would live. So anybody could use your paper if you decide to share it publicly. So did I answer that question, Amy, or is there more about that? Maybe let me go back into paper. I'm going to go back into papers to just kind of show you how you know whether you've shared a paper or not, and another way to share. So remember, this is your paper management. So all the papers that you create or find and save are living here. And here's that paper that I just created, sample paper. And I want you to look over here to the right. This paper has a little globe, and it's because I chose to share it publicly. And if you scroll down here, you'll see this paper has a link, and that means it's being shared by URL, but it's not public. So anyone in Classpad could find this paper, but only people I give the URL can get this paper. And let's say I decide, oh, I meant to share this paper. I can do it right from paper management. 3 dots again. I can share here. I can duplicate, make another copy of it. I can move it into a folder if I decide, oh, that should be my algebra folder. I can change the name, add tags, or if I hate the paper, I can delete it. So you can do a lot of the management right from this section too. You don't have to actually necessarily be in your paper. And if you remember at the beginning, I talked about the activities that are right there on the landing page of Classpad.net. Well, if you're in Classpad in this area, you can also find publicly shared papers as well. So you'll see over on the left-hand side, there's public papers, shared papers. So if I hit public papers, it's going to show me the latest ones that people have created and then staff picks. But if I want to search public papers, and I'm going to actually search public papers, let's just type in a keyword here. You can see I've been searching for matrices before, so let's try that again. When I hit enter, it's going to pull up any activity that has that keyword that I put in that has been shared publicly. So, you know, that's how you find other papers. Again, we're relatively new. Our bank's pretty, I forget how many activities are in there right now, and people are adding to them every day. So that's why it's important if you decide you're going to share publicly, make sure you put in some tags and keywords so people can find what they're looking for. So that is, I think I'm done as far as that, unless I need to go through something specific. Amy, what do you think?
You're able to get most of the questions answered, or all of the questions answered.
Okay, all right. So is there anything that anyone wants me to go back over, or I feel like I missed something because I went really fast. So I apologize.
So one question that just came in was about screencasting. So you could do exactly what Karen's doing and create your own paper and open it up and walk them through things using whatever platform you're using. So like, since we're using Zoom, but if you use a different, web sharing, you can do the same.
Right, and I use Classpad with my Drexel University students, and so I will create a paper and I put it on Blackboard. It's a URL link. They all work on the paper and send me back their version of it. So they basically save it in their account, do their work on it, it creates their own URL, and they post their URL with their reflection. And so I can see each one of their versions by that. So it's all URL sharing. And then when we do, like I just did a live Zoom with my Drexel students on Tuesday, where we walked through exactly what we're doing here. We went through the statistics activities to kind of help them see the statistics. Oh, I know what I wanted to show. I went so fast I forgot to do this. I'm going to scroll back into my statistics because there was a reason I put the labels in. I wanted to show you how everything is so interconnected. So you saw that when I defined the function g of x, I could then use it in the graph. So sort of the same idea here. I'm going to scroll down. Where is my, here, I'm going to pull this down where I can see it a little bit better. Let's say students were working and they were collecting their own data and they wanted to find the perimeter in the area using these lengths and widths and compare them. Technically, I could get a calculate sticky and do it by hand, right? I could do 2 times 2 plus 2 times 3. But since I know all of them are going to have the same formula, I could just create let's spell it correct, perim. I could use the fact that everything is connected in Classpad and actually define perimeter by using the titles. So I could say perimeter, and remember, instead of the equal, I'm going to use define. And now I'm going to type in these labels here. So let's say length. Oops, we want 2 times length, right? 2 times length. And one thing to note is capitalization does matter. So if I wrote a capital, I need to make sure I use a capital. But now watch what happens. It gives me the answer here in the calculate sticky as a list, but then it fills in my table because they are connected to each other. So that is So then I could do the same thing over here. Let's figure out what area is. And so I'm going to go into my calculate and define area to be length times width. And it's going to do the same thing. It's going to give me it over here in the calculate as a list, but then it's going to fill in my table. And now I can use it since it's in a table. I could compare. I could make a different, scatter plot using perimeter, area, length to perimeter, those types of things. So the interconnectedness of Classpad is a really nice feature because you can do lots of multiple representations as a result of that, because you don't have to leave the workspace. It's all connected. So I know this is a very fast overview, and we were going to save these last few minutes for any questions or answers. I'm happy to go through something specific. If you have a specific, I want to see something specific since we have some time. If you don't have any questions, I'm happy to do that.
Karen, can you talk about what the registered account has access to?
Okay, that's a great question. So I want to go in. Let me just show you kind of a difference. I'm going to go in as a guest right now. I think it'll let me do that. So right now, as part of the Casio Cares things, they are providing, because everyone's working remote these days, they are providing completely free access to all features of Classpad.net except, I think, the handwriting. But
yes. So
the engine behind Classpad is a CAS engine. So that means it can do things like, give me an example off the top of my head here. Factor
x squared minus 4.
X squared minus, oops. It's never good to do things right off the fly, but. So because of the CAS engine, it can do this. Now, this is not normally available. So everything in Classpad is free except the CAS feature and the AP statistics. So remember when I was showing you the tests and, oops. So if you just have the basic free account, which is like 98% of everything, you can't do the testing and the intervals, and I think it's the.
How much does AP statistics cost?
I believe for everything, it's a $25 app fee at this point. They're still working on that, but right now till August 31st. Everything is free. So if you sign up and register for an account for Classpad now, everything is free. So you get the CAS and the statistics as well, because they really want you to be playing and being able to support your students in the remote learning. So everything, if you signed up for an account today, you would have free access to everything. So it's just like you can still do calculations, you can still do graphing and regressions. All of that is part of the normal free everything. It's just the more advanced AP statistics that are that extra add-on app. And the reason they put the CAS behind a paywall is a lot of teachers asked us not to have that because they didn't want students to be able to do things like this, factor, solve, those types of things. Any other questions?
Yeah, can you talk about how you use it, the papers when your students are returning it back to you, and what that kind of looks like?
Can you say that again? How I use them?
So when you had a student fill out or work on a paper, you had questions about what it looks like when they return it to you.
Well, unfortunately, I can't actually show you to that because it's protected in my Drexel account. But let me pull up a paper that I know has work on it. So this was a paper I actually was working. I've been creating a lot of free mini math lessons, and so this is one I was working on. I think it was today. So if I were a student, so we were doing matrices, right? And so they were given these tables and they were asked to use matrices to solve them. So when they sent it back to me, what I would expect to see is they had to create the matrices, right? So here's the matrix that goes with this table, and then this is the labor one. So then I would expect to see another one. And here's where we go to our matrices. So I think it's 3 by 3. And so they would have, I would expect to see, you know, the matrices that they used. And then they had to do some calculations. And so I would expect to see, so basically showing your work is here, they're going to do matrix calculations. I would expect to see that. That would be the work that I would see. And then they have to explain their answers. And so notice that this activity, you know, everything that's green that matches the banner is the directions and the questions. And then anything that's yellow is where I expect them to have an answer. So they would have an actual answer here written out for me. And then this table, they're collecting data, they would have filled in the table. So this would have been filled in. When I gave it to them, it wasn't, but when they turn it back to me, it's filled in. So there's going to be answers in the yellow thing. So that's sort of how it works. I mean, I like to set up my papers where my directions are in one color and students are always answering in yellow. I don't know why I chose yellow, but yellow is the color that I use for writing their answers. And so when they send it back to me, I usually ask them to put their name up here next to the title so I know it's their paper. And then their answers are here and all their work is in the workspace. So if it was a graph that they had to make or a scatter plot or a description or whatever it might be, I would expect to see that. So a table filled out, a calculation done, the matrices done, those types of things. And then they're working, they've taken my paper and they're working in their own account. So they simply share their URL with me. And so I get back, you know, the URL for each student because they have to put it in their, in Blackboard, we have discussion board. So they put it in their discussion board as a link and then their descriptor of what they did. I hope that answered the question.
Yes.
Okay. Anything else? Okay.
So to know that someone has submitted a link, this was a question that you would have to kind of, like Karen says, she uses Blackboard, so she has to pay attention to which link she clicks on or she selects as she's, you know, opening up and viewing papers. We have other educators who have students email them the link, so you just have to be cognizant. Another idea is to include a little box at the top of each paper that the students can write their names in it, so that you can see it on the direct paper. And then someone else made a comment that you could make it an assignment in Google Classroom.
Right.
And then when they submit the link as their assignment, you would just need to pay attention to whose link you're opening up. We are working to try to kind of make this a little bit closer to, you know, Google Sheets and Google Docs where you can immediately add answers on top. As Karen says, this is a fairly new product. So we are working on, you know, updating development as we go.
Right.
So we are always open to ideas. In fact, Karen, if you go back to the main Classpad.net page and scroll.
Oh, here.
I think it's at the very bottom now.
Oh.
Under contact. Yes. You can report a bug, not really a bug.
Anything that you, things that you think, oh, this would be nice if you could do this. We're still learning. Like, in fact, I'm piloting right now with some of my Drexel students. And so we're using their feedback to help us make improvements, that type of thing. So because it's so new, there's a lot of things that we are constantly trying to improve and change, and we love feedback. If there's no other questions, I did want to I'm just going to throw this up here. There's lots of places to go for support. So the Facebook, the Twitter. On Twitter, I've been posting free lessons every day. So like this week, I've been focused on matrices. So there's been a lot of new lessons on matrices there that are free and public to use. And then there's the YouTube site there. And then, of course, our homepage. So I would recommend signing up for a free account, especially now, because you'll have access to everything through August. And just start playing. It's a lot of fun. And the more you play, the more you kind of realize how it's all connected and works. And then we also have Casio Cares. There's a lot of free emulators, free activities for math for those of you who are looking for things to do with your students in the next few months. So make sure you go there. And we are going to continue our webinar series, and they're always going to be free. And so next Thursday, our content focus is going to be on linear functions. So we're going to really dive into the graphs and using sliders and images and statistics, so kind of that multiple representation type of thing. So that's next Thursday. And we hope you join us. And thank you so much for listening. And hopefully you'll get out there and start playing. It's a lot of fun.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you everyone for attending. Thank you, Amy and Karen, for hosting this very informative webinar on this very dynamic tool. So I'm quite excited myself. So again, thanks to everyone. Please continue to take good care of yourselves. I really hope that you and your families are doing well during this time. And as I always tell everyone I work with, make sure that you're having some time for self-care as well. So have a great night.
Yeah, thanks so much. And thank you, Crystal, for letting us partner with you on this. We really appreciate that.
Oh, no, thank you.
All right.
Have a great night.
Good night, everybody. Thank you very much.
Good night.